I mean, who cares if people want to believe in demons and angels and ghosts and all that, right? Like, live. Let the people live. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun, you are in the right place. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, turn on all the notifications, and then that way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. When we think of Crue Trime, the first thing that comes to mind is like disappearance, kidnapping, murder. Literally the worst things that can happen to a person. But you know what else is a crime? Scams. Money scams, impersonation, theft, good old-fashioned lying. And that's what we're going to dig into today. And I already know that people are going to get really mad at me. But it's okay. I can take it. Today, I'm exposing these phony scam artist frauds. This is the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. My hair is getting shorter and shorter, isn't it? And it's also turning white. Do you see this? Longtime married couple Ed and Lorraine Warren were paranormal investigators and authors. Lorraine claimed to be a clairvoyant psychic medium, and Ed was a demonologist. Hey girl! So match made in heaven, I guess. This couple claimed to have investigated thousands of hauntings and other paranormal activities, and they had a paranormal museum that displayed all these cursed artifacts, and their work inspired many incredibly popular books and TV series and documentaries and movies. Some of those films include the Amityville Horror and this never-ending The Conjuring cinematic universe. These books and films that made them incredibly famous and rich were based on actual events, you know, families that were terrorized by ghosts and demons. I mean, at least that's what they want you to think. How do they do it? I'm glad you asked. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Lorraine Rita Warren was born on January 31st, 1929 in Bridgeport, Connecticut to Georgiana and James Warren Sr. She and her younger brother James Jr. were raised as devout Catholics in Bridgeport, and as a very young girl, like as early as 9, Lorraine began seeing light around people. And she didn't realize until much later that she was communicating with others. Gonna be a lot of air quotes in today's video. She would later say that she was a clairvoyant and a light trance medium, somebody that's able to communicate with beings from the other side. When Lorraine was 16, she met another 16-year-old guy, Ed Warren. Ed Warren Miney was born on September 7th, 1926 in also Bridgeport, Connecticut to Pauline and Frank Miney, and his family was also super mega Catholic, and he had a younger brother named Frank and a twin sister named Babette. Now, I looked everywhere to try to figure out why Ed used his middle name Warren as his last name instead of Miney, but that's another mystery, I guess. So Ed claims to have grown up in a haunted house. He says that he saw apparitions as early as 5 years old. The first one he remembers seeing, he describes as a dot of light, or like a ball of light, that just grew into the shape of his family's landlady, who had died a year earlier. She was semi-transparent and then just sort of disappeared. He also claimed that he dreamt of dead relatives that he had never actually met, including an aunt that would send him messages about the future. I mean, that sounds to me like Ed is the psychic one, but okay. So Ed and Lorraine met as teenagers and began dating around 1944. Teenage Ed was working as a lifeguard during the day and as an usher at the Colonial Theater in Bridgeport at night. And on September 7th, 1943, on Ed's 17th birthday, he enlisted in the Navy and shipped off to World War II. Wait. The math ain't mathin'. If Ed enlisted in the Navy on his 17th birthday, that's 1943. So how was Ed working as an usher and a lifeguard in 1944 when he met Lorraine? Because I am the Virgoist of Virgos, I took entirely too much time chasing after this little nugget. So researching how Ed and Lorraine met in their younger years before they got really into this ghost stuff. Apparently the exaggerations and the misinformation surrounding them start very early. So the story of how Ed and Lorraine met, as published by their own son-in-law, Tony Spera, on the New England Society for Psychic Research, this organization that they founded, it says that they met in 1944, but Ed would have already been in the Navy if he joined on his 17th birthday, as they say. Tony also writes that about 4 months into Ed's Navy service, he was somewhere on a ship in the North Atlantic when it sank after a collision, and he miraculously survived and rushed home to Lorraine with, quote, just enough time to be with her for a few hours before having to return to duty, which is also not accurate. What happened was, on February 5th, 1945, Navy Armed Guard Ed was working on a security detail aboard the tanker Spring Hill that was anchored just off of the coast of Staten Island, New York. So technically the North Atlantic, but they're making it sound like Titanic area. Okay? It wasn't. Anyways, it was struck by a Panamanian oil tanker, catching fire in the collision, and Ed and the rest of the crew had to abandon ship by jumping in the water, which they were immediately rescued, although 19 people did die in the accident. Why do I care? These aren't small details, okay, in my opinion. When you Google Ed Warren Navy service, what comes up makes him sound like he's some kind of war hero, and he just never bothered to correct any of it, which is bothersome. It just makes me squint at their credibility, you know? I'm just saying, it's not starting out well. Ed and Lorraine got married shortly after the incident. You know, nothing speeds up important life decisions like a near-death experience, am I right? Ed got out of the Navy pretty soon after that, and then he and Lorraine welcomed a baby girl that they named Judy. Ed was actually a talented painter. I did not know this. So after he got out of the Navy, he enrolled at Perry Art School, and about halfway through his bachelor's degree program, he withdrew and instead decided to sell his paintings in these pop-ups, like tourist traps, all along New England. Meanwhile, Ed said that he was a born demonologist.
But you can call me Lucy with an I. All my friends do.
This isn't something that he studied formally. Apparently there wasn't a demonology department at Perry Art School. Well, Ed and Lorraine both shared this pretty intense interest in the paranormal, you know, ghosts and such. And they were trying to figure out how they could pursue that professionally. So Ed and Lorraine would find out where these haunted places were, you know, homes, churches, whatever, buildings. They would drive to these places, park out on the street, and then Ed would sketch a picture of this haunted house. When he was done, Lorraine would take the drawing and then go knock on the door, approaching these homeowners with the sketch as a friendly gesture. The idea was that they would be invited in and they could start a conversation about the haunting that this family was certainly experiencing.
Hey there, demons. It's me, your boy.
Supremely weird, in my opinion, but okay. It's not a terrible idea, but still weird. Think about how weird this is. Somebody knocks on your door, assuming that you didn't notice them parked outside of your house, drawing it. Then they show you this drawing they did and then want to talk to you about how haunted your house is and these ghosts that you have bothering you. Okay. Anyway, this went on for a couple of years until they built out their paranormal network. This kind of thing is certainly a word of mouth type operation. You know, in-person proof is better than anything you can just describe to someone.
I think the best proof that you could possibly give people would be miraculous miracles.
Miraculous miracles, you say. Are there other kinds?
Magic everywhere in this bitch.
The point is, one haunted house owner refers the Warrens to another, you know, and then they built up this reputation as legitimate ghost hunters that could communicate with spirits and help a person rid themselves of this supernatural nuisance. They're like exterminators, sort of.
This house is clean.
I mean, the good news is the Warrens weren't charging a fee for their services. In 1952, the Warrens created the New England Society for Psychic Research, and calling it a research organization made it sound scholarly and credible. Nesper and the Warrens responded to every case that was presented, and they amassed a lot of case files. Using all of this information, they started hosting lectures where they would teach others about the paranormal things they had investigated, and they also started writing about their experiences in books, and that's when the money started to really roll in. So, Probably the most famous and well-known case associated with the Warrens is the Amityville Horror. So really quick backstory. So on November 13th, 1974, this is totally true, by the way, Ronald DeFeo Jr. killed his entire family, 6 people, including his siblings and parents. He used a shotgun and he killed them in their beds while they slept. No motive, no assistance. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was convicted and sentenced to 6 life terms, which he's currently serving. Now, a little more than a year later, a young family purchased the house at 112 Ocean Avenue and moved in on December 18th, 1975. George and Kathleen Lutz and their 3 children. Apparently, not knowing that the reason that they got such a steal on the house was because of a grisly murder that took place inside of it. So almost immediately after moving into the house, the Lutz family started feeling strange sensations. They were arguing more than ever. Kathy was getting physically sick. The daughter, Jody, had an imaginary friend that was in the shape of a red-eyed pig. Very strange. Green, gelatinous ooze was pouring out of strange places. Weird black stains kept appearing out of nowhere. A swarm of flies invaded one of the rooms in the house, although it was the dead of winter in Long Island. They heard voices, they saw visions, they saw giant hoof prints in the snow outside on New Year's Day.
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It was a nightmare. So after 28 days in the house, so not even an entire month, the Lutz family fled in the middle of the night and they left everything inside of the house and never returned. So a local news reporter actually contacted the Warrens to investigate. He'd worked with them on a previous case somewhere else. So supposedly the Warrens were never told about the DeFeo murders that happened in the house. They were only told about all the things that the Lutz family was encountering. Because remember, they weren't supposed to know about it either. Once they got to the house, Lorraine claimed to be overcome by psychic energy and these psychic visions of bodies lying down on the floor covered in white sheets, the DeFeo family. And Ed was physically pushed down in the basement by some kind of force. And as with every investigation they did, the Warrens would document it with audio recordings and video if available, photographs always. And in one photo, super creepy, they captured what appears to be the image of a young boy, which might be the ghostly image of one of the murdered DeFeo children. The Warrens eventually concluded that Shinnecock Indians had previously used that land where the home was built to house the mentally ill, and that negative energy had stayed on the property and attracted demonic spirits, which is what caused Ronnie DeFeo to murder his family and what drove the Lutzes to flee. I mean, that's a wild story. Okay, and to be honest, it's one of my favorite movies, Amityville Horror. They've made it 16 times, by the way. But the truth is, number one, first of all, the Shinnecock people did not live anywhere near Amityville. Also, can we stop using this Indian burial ground trope in every movie? Come on. Number two, there was no snow on New Year's Day for any giant cloven hoof prints to appear. It didn't even snow that year. Number three, some reports say that the Warrens did know about the DeFeo murder because they worked with his lawyer. DeFeo's attorney said that he, George and Kathy Lutz, and the Warrens got together one day, drank 4 bottles of wine, and then they had this very creative writing session about what kind of things could go into writing a really good horror book. He also said that the story was extra fabricated so that DeFeo could use the house in his insanity defense. Number 4, the photo of the young boy on the stairs while the Warrens were there overnight filming was proven to be Paul Bartz. Paul was a young guy who was working with the Warrens on the Ocean Drive house, and if you look closely, the ghost is wearing the same shirt that Paul was wearing the night that they set up these infrared cameras to take the pictures. Also, infrared camera explains the glowing, creepy eyes. That's what they look like in infrared cameras. Number 5, the family that purchased the house after the Lutzes left never had any issues. No damage, no strange smells, no voices, no temperature changes, no flies, no apparitions, no nothing. In fact, I personally know someone who grew up in Amityville. She attended sleepovers in that house as a kid, and it was totally normal and fine. Number 6, one of the Lutz children later came forward as an adult saying that the dramatic story of the occurrences in the house were wildly exaggerated. Number 7, the Lutz family quickly sold their story for book and movie deals, and they collect royalties, of course. Now, arguably, they got a shitty deal because they didn't make the money that the Warrens did, but that's another story. So, bottom line, the Amityville Horror is not a documentary, but let's all take a moment to appreciate the good things that have come from it, such as this scene from the 2005 remake starring Ryan Reynolds. Thank you. All right, moving on. Some other notable cases include this one from 1977, where the Warrens investigated some poltergeist activity. The house was located in the North London suburb of Enfield. Peggy Hodgson and her 2 daughters, Jeanette and Margaret, were living in this house, and they claimed that furniture would move by itself, doors would slam shut, or they would freeze so that you couldn't open them at all. There was constant knocking sounds coming from the walls or tapping coming from upstairs. And they even called the police to come out and investigate, and they heard the same thing too, but they couldn't do anything about it. So the Warrens came and they installed equipment, as they normally do, to kind of like measure or document this poltergeist activity. They also installed a time-lapse camera in the girls' bedroom, which supposedly caught the girls levitating. Look at these pictures. Now, eventually the Warrens did do a seance to like cleanse the house of these bothersome spirits. What really happened was that the girls were faking it. They'd been the ones knocking on the walls, using the broom to tap on the ceiling, and the picture in their room had just been them jumping on the bed. It was a time-lapse camera. It was like super easy to jump and look like you're levitating. The Warrens never acknowledged this fact, but they sure took advantage to write a book called The Demonologist, and in that book that Enfield haunting was featured, and it later inspired the movie The Conjuring 2.
Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
In 1981, Ed and Lorraine were called out to a demonic possession in Brookfield, Connecticut. So the family of 11-year-old David Glatzel said that he was possessed by a demon. He was hallucinating, he was growling, yelling, acting like a monster. Well, the Warrens helped the family get approval from the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism. That whole thing took days, the exorcism, and some of the family members were getting worried. I guess they were getting worried that he wasn't going to survive it. So his brother-in-law, Arnie Johnson, urged the demon to leave David's body and come into his, which is something that the Warrens strongly warned against. Eventually, the adults present all claimed to have seen a demon leaving David's body. And then he returned to normal. So, great. Awesome. Cured. Thank you so much. Everything returned back to normal, and they thought everything was fine. But a few months later, Arnie Johnson started acting strange. He said that he was hearing voices that nobody else was hearing, just like David did. He later ended up killing his landlord over a minor dispute, and then he had no recollection of the incident at all. Now, the Warrens actually stayed involved in this case, and they tried to help him to not be held responsible because he was possessed by a demon.
The devil, Satan, they shove aside.
Well, the judge wasn't having it at all. Arnie was convicted of manslaughter and was sent to prison. He only did 5 years' time. Okay, so we can all relax. Now for the truth. The Warrens, once they became involved, would sit with Mrs. Glatzel and discuss the symptoms, the behaviors that David was exhibiting, and they would do it in front of David. Either later that day or a couple days later, David would start acting exactly as what was described at the table, including any new symptoms that might have been suggested. Their father, Carl Sr., never believed that David was possessed by a demon, and when David would start going on his tirades, being uncontrollable by everyone else, Carl would sometimes come around and give him a slap and a stern knock it the fuck off. And wouldn't you know it, that demon would sit down and be very quiet. David Glatzel did improve significantly, but it was less because of the exorcism and more because he was properly diagnosed with a mental illness and medicated properly. Arnie Johnson, who supposedly became possessed by this demon and killed his landlord, never had any other episodes of demonic behavior and never had an exorcism performed on him to rid him of this demon, but he made a full recovery. The landlord also had a previous relationship with Arnie's fiance. So could this have been like a jealous rage argument incident? Maybe. One of David's brothers, Carl Jr., spoke out against the Warrens, saying that the book and movie they'd been involved in took advantage of his brother's mental illness instead of trying to help him. Also, he later said that he discovered that their mother was sedating all of them with Sominex. She would mix the crushed up pills into their dinners without them knowing, and this was all during the time leading up to David's possession. Now, Sominex is a sleeping pill that, used over time for prolonged use, can sometimes cause hallucinations, mood swings, and weight gain. David, by the way, maintains to this day that he was possessed by a demon. One of the most famous cases that the Warrens worked on, Annabelle. It was a children's doll that was possessed by a demon, and you've definitely heard of this story unless you live under a rock. So the backstory on Annabelle was that in 1970, a nurse was gifted a doll by her roommate, also a nurse. They decided to do a seance one night. One of them was friends with a medium of some kind, and the medium said that the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle who died in a car accident that happened right outside their apartment. Well, the nurses believed the story. They weren't creeped out by it. I think they were just sort of entertained, so they just started treating Annabelle like she was a real-life girl, meaning they carried her around everywhere. They would tuck her in at night for bedtime, they would buy her extra clothes and little bracelets and things. But then things started getting weird. They started hearing strange noises. They started finding notes that neither one of them said that they were writing to each other, so they were from Annabelle. Then they started finding Annabelle sitting in places that they didn't put her. One day they came home and Annabelle was standing on the floor waiting for them.
Instantly, I was like, yeah, no.
Like, holy shit, imagine this doll waiting for you. Oh, wait a second. That's not the doll. That's the one from the movie. This is the actual Annabelle. That's a doll-shaped pillow. That thing can't even sit up without leaning against something. But let's just say that this Raggedy Ann doll was standing up. Of course, they're freaked out. They call the Warrens for help. The Warrens came out and told them that their fear of the doll was actually making the force stronger. Oh, and by the way, it was not the spirit of a dead child that was inside the doll. It was a demon.
But God does not allow the spirit of a child to go into a doll. This was a demon.
So the Warrens arrived with a priest to exorcise this demon out of the doll, and apparently the priest was involved in a terrible car accident immediately following that, so they said it was caused by this demon. He survived, by the way. Well, the Warrens decided that the doll was too dangerous, so they took it home and locked it up in this enclosure in their paranormal museum, for public safety.
I'm not going to touch it. I never touch it. Not with bare hands. People say, well, didn't you bring it to Las Vegas? I did bring it to Las Vegas.
Oh, wait, what was that? You can move the doll if it's going to make money? Well, the Warrens' Paranormal Museum is permanently closed now, but it operated for many years with a modest entry fee of about $3. So not a lot, but that shit adds up quick. So this museum featured not only the actual Annabelle doll, but it was filled with all kinds of cursed items that the Warrens kept locked up for safety, like this insane spirit doll.
You see, you must be very careful with a doll like this. You can never destroy it. If you destroy it, you could have things occur to you that would be harmful. Because the spirits that are within the doll then are freed.
Didn't Ed say that God doesn't let spirits inhabit dolls?
God does not allow the spirit of a child to go into a doll.
So like only demons do that? Potato, potato, I guess. Now I love a good haunted doll story, and I love haunted doll eyes. Apparently. I've actually covered one on this channel. I'll link the video right here, one of these sides. But here's the thing about the Annabelle story. It's an exact ripoff of an episode of The Twilight Zone. There are many other scenarios like this, where the Warrens were called to the family of a home that was being terrorized by some supernatural force, but they left out the fact that there was sometimes drug or alcohol abuse present, or mental illness present, or domestic violence present, or even simple maintenance issues that caused lights to flicker or weird noises to occur. The proof that the Warrens would capture was also questionable. Why can't you see the bottom of this table? It just looks like there's somebody out of frame pulling the leg of the table or the chair. Come on. Now, as I mentioned before, Ed and Lorraine did not charge money for their services, so this is not on the same level as some of these fake psychic detectives like Sylvia Brown. But the Warrens did seek out people to help, and then they took these experiences, juiced them up with a bunch of scary details, made gobs of money selling books and doing speaking engagements, and they raked in a heap of cash licensing the stories for TV and films. But the shitty thing was they would cut out some of these ghostwriters or co-authors or the people named in the stories. It's full-on theft.
I steal, I get by, you know, how I can, and that's just the way it is.
The Conjuring cinematic universe alone has like 8 movies and counting. And it's all based on a bunch of crap that people think is like documentary 100% fact.
Your tone seems very pointed right now.
I mean, who cares if people want to believe in demons and angels and ghosts and all that shit, right? Like live, let the people live. Who cares? The problem is this based on a true story stuff brings a lot of attention, specifically unwanted attention to the real life people that live in these houses or have connections to these events. And this attention is stuff like people showing up, tourists, you know, just appearing at these people's homes all hours, people vandalizing property, people stealing things from their property, or these people being unfairly associated with things that they don't want to be associated with. The original Amityville house was so inundated with unwanted tourists that it had to be remodeled completely to change the entire exterior. Like you can't tell it's the same house. I mean, not to mention that there's people who actually believe that the Warrens had some kind of psychic ability and they could cure what was undoubtedly just severe mental illness with prayers in some holy water. So the Warrens worked with a variety of these horror genre authors to, you know, write these many books based on their investigations. In one of the cases involving the Snedeker family in Connecticut, the co-writer Ray Garton was having trouble kind of reconciling the Snedeker family's like in-person accounts of the events. So he went to Ed Warren with the problem, and Ed said, quote, "Oh, they're crazy. Everyone who comes to us is crazy. You've got enough, just use what works and make the rest up. And make it scary."
Oh, see, there you go. There you go. The lies.
So Ray Garton is the one who co-authored In a Dark Place with the Warrens. It later inspired the movie The Haunting in Connecticut. He said that the Warrens actually transitioned away from ghosts to demons because of the popularity of The Exorcist. They started out as ghost hunters, but then suddenly everywhere the Warrens went, people were being molested by demons. So, interesting. The strangest chapter in the Warrens story that nobody seems to be talking about, by the way, is regarding Ed Warren's assistant, Judith Penny. So Ed had worked as a bus driver in the early 60s before the ghost hunting business started to really make money, and Judith was a student at Central High School who rode his bus. So beginning in 1963, a then 30-year-old Ed hired a 15-year-old Judith. She later moved in to the Warrens' home in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and she and Ed commenced a full-blown sexual affair. Now let's be clear, a 15-year-old girl cannot consent to a sexual relationship with a 30-year-old man who is also her employer. But the kicker is that arrangement was totally approved by Lorraine.
I'm sorry, what?
Judith has actually provided sworn testimony that she lived in the Warrens' house as Ed's lover. She carried a relationship on with him for over 40 years, until or close to Ed's death in 2006. She moved in with the Warrens and then eventually occupied an apartment that was built for her in the house, like in the attic. And in May of 1978, Judith became pregnant, and these devout Catholics, Ed and Lorraine Warren, forced her to have an abortion so as to not bring scandal to their growing business. Judith just posed as like an assistant, right? Answering the phones, assisting on these investigations, so it all looked very normal. And I think half the time, people just thought that was their daughter. Judith also said that when she would assist on these ghost investigations, she would sometimes pose as a ghost for film shoots. So the existence of Judith Penny didn't come to light until well after Ed's death, and it seems like great lengths have been taken over the years to keep it that way. According to the Nesper website, which is riddled with errors, by the way, the Warrens have handled over 10,000 cases. 10,000. That's like one a day for 27 years in a row, no days off. Anyways, some of the most famous cases have been featured in books and movies that have become insanely popular, and there's also many documentaries that squint at the Warrens. I'll link a few down in the description box for you to check out. Ed Warren died at age 79 on August 23rd, 2006, and Lorraine died at age 92 on April 18th, 2019. They are buried at the Stepney Cemetery in Monroe, Connecticut together. I'm obviously a skeptic. I think the Warrens were hypocritical scammers that exploited vulnerable people for a lot of money. Do you believe that Ed and Lorraine were the real deal? Let me know in the comments below. And that is the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren. If you want to know any of the makeup that I used in today's look, then just look down in the description box. I have linked everything, and if I used anything that's super expired or not available, I'll find you something similar. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, even if it's kind of a stretch like this one, just look down in the description box. There's a link to a Google Doc so you can fill in all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. I'm so social. Not even a little. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! So Ed and... Fuck. Was that a fart? I heard a squeaking fart. Lies. When we when we think of it. Do you think? Yeah, my microphone has not been on. A research permanently